Welcome back, fellow weavers of worlds and shapers of destiny. I'm Ben, I'm your rookie DM, and we're here to pick up on the Bessar campaign. Let's get into it. Okay, so last time we left off, the players had just defeated Xandalgar the Marked and stood in the large circular chamber, which served as his sacrifice chamber, an offering to the god Merkel, attempting to gain immortality from this deity. As the players sort of gather themselves after the fight, they healed up a little bit. They collected their coin from the Baron, 50 gold pieces apiece. They asked for more, and he essentially was like, screw you, this is what I agreed to, have a good day. And he kind of made an offhand comment about how he has a halfling to talk to, because basically the Baron is upset because he was sold a bag of goods, more or less, that, you know, the diamond skull that he purchased was going to bring doom and destruction to his village, which he happens to like quite a lot. And he now has had to pay even more money just to get this retrieved, and he wants to get his money back from the halfling, being sort of the businessman that he is. So he leaves off with his drow bodyguard, and the players are left with a chamber to explore. So they go into the chamber that Xandalgar and the Marked had come out of and discovered that it was a laboratory of sorts. There are notes everywhere. There's tubes with like long dead individuals in them. The beakers, you know, all the kind of typical laboratory accoutrement, as you might say. And, you know, plenty of evidence of someone who is doing, you know, I think the way I phrased it is like, people like this are what give necromancy a bad name. Like, this is the very much the textbook evil necromancer type thing going on here. And they found under the bed there was a bag of holding inside of a chest that they managed to recover. And the bag of holding, I think, had a healing potion or two in it and some other, you know, not very much of value, but they got a bag of holding out of it at level 3, which I thought was pretty cool. They also found a homebrew magic item that I came up with called the Immovable Javelin. So it's very simple. It basically, it you know, from a stats perspective, it functions just like a normal javelin, although it is considered magical, so it would deal magical damage for, you know, the purposes of creatures who have resistance or immunity to non-magical damage. And this javelin has 2 buttons on it. One button allows it to function like an immovable rod. So basically it's a movable rod built into a weapon. The second button allows you to throw it up to 60 feet, and then it will return to you upon impact. So it allows you, if you wish to throw the javelin, because the javelin is a throwable weapon, but not have to retrieve it, you can do that. But again, it just deals normal javelin damage, nothing too crazy. But I thought it was like kind of a cool, you know, uncommon to rare-ish level magic item. Doesn't require attunement or anything like that, but it's kind of cool, and it's all solid metal. It's just, I imagine, as this like silver metallic rod with the spear tip on the end that is has no parts to it. It's just one solid piece of metal. That's pretty cool. Then inside the desk, inside a locked drawer, which they managed to unlock, they found a journal from Xandalgar and the Marked. And in this journal, there is a description of his various attempts to try and win Merkel's favor, to win immortality and endless life from this deity. And part of what this gentleman did was to slay the entire village that was previously on this island hundreds of years ago, and take their bodies as an offering to Merkel and try and experiment on them and all these different things, and raising undead. And basically what they learned from their history checks is that Merkel is one of the dead three, and that Merkel is actually not a big fan of killing in his name because Baal is the god of murder, and to commit murder gives more power to Baal and not necessarily always to Merkel, or it may give it power to them somewhat equally. So Merkel's not a big fan of this idea of committing mass genocide in his name because it doesn't actually help him that much and helps his sort of rivals in the Dead Three. And so I thought it was just kind of interesting to have this, like, just because someone says they're serving a deity doesn't mean they actually are. They might be using that deity to try to serve themselves, and in doing so, really piss off that deity. And, you know, just because you're doing an evil things doesn't mean an evil deity will like what you are doing, right? And so I thought it was just kind of interesting just to kind of have that in there and basically imply that Merkel finally said, oh, you want to live forever? Okay, now you're an undead, horribly mutated zombie creature that's just trapped here until I decide that you can be let out. And then he was let out and destroyed. So that was kind of the punishment of Zandalgaran the Marked. And then in his notes, he also alluded to an individual named Quana Conoco, who had been chasing him, and he's calling those Valdis scum, which Valdis are an old family that used to rule in the old Iscarian Empire hundreds of years ago, like 500 plus years ago. And so he had basically been chased off of the mainland and fled to this island to continue to pursue his pursuit of immortality. But so that was kind of a way of introducing a character named Quana Conoco. Now, Quana is going to be someone who kind of comes up more a little bit later. This was someone I originally created as a warlock patron for one of the players in the original campaign, but I liked this character and this idea so much that I decided to keep him in there, even though I don't have a way for them to really be a patron in that way. But I was like, well, they could still be an ancient magical influence, you know, of sorts. So I decided to keep Quana Conoco in there and not change those notes, even though I had to repurpose them a little bit between campaigns. On their way out of the temple and back toward Ocoee village, the players decided to stop by an old ruined village, which implicitly was the one that was referred to in Zandalgaran's journal. This village didn't have a whole lot in it. It was kind of devoted to Agma, which is a patron god of like bards, and no, I changed it. It was Agma. I changed it to Saluna because I don't remember exactly why I decided to change it. I just did. It's not really of consequence, really. It was just something that I just felt fit a little bit better, but it doesn't really matter. It's just one of the considered good or neutral deities. They were able to discover under the temple to this deity, there is a basement, and in the basement were a couple of corpses that were kind of lost there, and there's a desk that had some magic paper in it for the wizard. Nice little bit of loot there. And there was a old book that had a metallic lock that was kind of had it sealed shut, but the lock had no keyhole of any kind, and they don't really have a way of opening it at the moment, but it is decorated with symbology related to Bahamut, and this book was sort of in the grasp of a dead individual who is actually Quana Conoco. I don't know if they actually picked that up or figured that out, but this book was actually Quana Conoco's book, and it is a tome which Quana actually sealed her essence in a way, and it only reveals its contents to someone that Bahamut would deem worthy. Quana is a little bit of a keeper of secrets in a way, someone who is trying to track down and keep secrets of the world hidden and protected and safe because we don't want to lose them, but we also don't want them falling into the wrong hands. So Quanah kind of took it upon herself as a servant of justice and a servant of Bahamut and as a servant of society itself to guard and protect ancient secrets. And as was mentioned in Zandalgaran the Mark's journal, Quanah had chased Zandalgaran to Ocoee Island and apparently met her fate and bitter end, trapped below a bunch of rubble below a destroyed temple. And they found this. So anyways, they found this book, and the paladin who serves Bahamut in the party decided to that they wanted to keep it. And I thought, great, this is like, now why did I actually really wanted them to find this book. I was hoping they would, because it is a great way for me to seed information to the players. So you may ask, like, what is going to be in this book? I don't fully know yet. I haven't fully decided. I have basically fleshed out as much as what I've told you. There is some lore and some stuff that we could get into, but we'll save that for later. Because Quanah Conoco was part of a group, an old and forgotten adventuring party that is really interesting. But that's something for later. But right for now, the book is a way for me to seed information or ideas or even potential plot hooks, locations to the players through dreams or through the book opening itself and revealing text of some kind. Like, there's so many cool things that you can do with this book. So in my original campaign, this book was going to be sort of the pact connection between the warlock and the patron, with the patron being Quanah herself. And that player was not a full warlock. It was like a padlock, like paladin warlock multi, I believe, if I remember correctly. And so he was only going to take a couple levels of warlock. So I was like, okay, well, technically you do need a patron, but warlock is not going to be a major part of your character arc, as it were. So I thought, well, what's a warlock patron that I could make that would not be intrusive but would make sense and potentially be helpful for this particular thing? Because I thought, if the player is not wanting to dive into warlock class enough to actually go into the dynamics of a warlock patron relationship, I wanted to basically if the player's telling me I'm only taking a couple levels of warlock just because I want, X, Y, and Z, then I'm taking that as a hint from the player that they don't necessarily want to get super deep into exploring those warlock patron dynamics. So I thought, okay, well, I can kind of homebrew something that is a little bit more fitting for the multi-class. And this is kind of what I came up with, was this ancient, super powerful, magical person named Quanah Conoco, who had this book and all that. So the paladin is not, in the second campaign, is not planning on multi-classing, but we can basically do the same kind of thing. It's just a way of seeding information to the players, and I think it's really cool. So, and they seem to be really into it too. So they left the village. They go to Ocoee village, the one that's not in ruins, and go to the dock to find the halfling being accosted and shouted at by the Baron, who retrieves his coin from the halfling and decides to also take the magic item, which allows him to teleport or do the Misty Step, like I mentioned in the last episode. And he actually does try to teleport away again, but Mistra, I don't think it's Mistra. Sorry. The drow. I don't remember her name. It doesn't matter. She counterspells it. She has the ability to counterspell due to her class and level. And that would have been his second use of that for the day, which he only has 2 uses. So he's done. So he kind of admits defeat there and goes back onto Electo's ship, having given up those items to the Baron. And the players ask the Baron, hey, some of that money was ours. And the Baron is like, well, it's mine now, basically. which they were not very happy about. But they didn't have very much money to start with, so they decided to let it fly. One thing that was interesting though, before they left the temple to Merkel, one of the players was role playing correctly for his character as he plays him. Was role playing the idea of like, why don't we? I mean, we've defeated Zandalgaran the Marked. Like, maybe we've made this temple inert and not powerful now. Maybe we can actually take the skull and sell it off somewhere else. And they really debated on whether or not they could do that. And at one point, they did remove the skull, which caused the runes above to light up again like they were before when the undead attacked the village. And even still, they debated whether or not it was a good idea to keep it, and they ultimately decided to leave it. But I thought it was interesting, and I liked leaving that choice to the players. Like, do you decide, I want to take the skull and screw this village? They can fend for themselves. I don't care. This is a really big payday, because it is a diamond skull, right? That's worth a lot of gold. Or do you decide to not do it? So I think it's kind of cool to put those decisions in front of the party where there's the consequences at this point are pretty clear. Like, realistically what is going to happen. But maybe you decide to do it anyway. Maybe you decide, I don't care. I want the money. Which is kind of was the halfling rogue's stance. He didn't really care. He wanted the money. So anyway, they board Captain Electo's ship. They are approached by Chloe. Now, Chloe was a waitress at the Fainting Goat pub, kind of 17, 18-year-old, half-elven female who is a bard, level 1 bard, basically, and who had basically begged them for financial help to help her get off of the island and get to Satis. That's where she really wants to go. Because she's like, I need to get off this island. There's nothing for me here. My parents have been killed. And I want to train at the School of Bards in Satis and be an adventurer and see the world. She's kind of bright-eyed and, ready for adventure kind of a thing. And maybe a little bit naive, but also like kind of spunky and can take care of herself a little bit. They take pity on her and decide to pay her way on Captain Electo's ship. But they don't want to go to Satis because a couple of them decided, we want to go to Nharuun on Ocoee Island because we want to see what's going on over there. A couple of the party members actually have backstory related reasons for going to Nharuun. And they had kind of hinted before that they might want to go there, like a session or two before. So I was a little bit ready for this, but there was a part of me that's like, okay. And this is where the two campaigns very, very much diverge. And I will not really be bringing up the other campaign anymore, at least for a while, because it's not relevant. The current campaign, the current group, they decided to sail to Nharuun. And I think that's about the end of the journey there. They have successfully saved Ocoee Island from Merkel's wrath, I should say, not his raft. It's a very deadly raft. I don't want to mess with this. They returned the diamond skull. They resisted the temptation to take the diamond skull, which is kind of funny. And they got paid. They paid for passage. They made good with Captain Electo and Yosa, the goblin first mate. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired today. The goblin first mate. They made good. They made amends there and set sail. As they set sail, now we get to the first encounter table of the campaign. I was wrong. This is not where the session ends. It actually goes on just a smidge further. The first day, they rolled a storm that caused them to lose a day, kind of a very standard encounter table thing, especially on the open seas. The second day, they rolled a marrow attack, where it's just four standard marrows, it's MERROW, which, again, for a level 3 party might be considered deadly, but considering that there's crew and there's Captain Electo and First Mate Yosa to help, it was, kind of a medium level difficulty fight. Not too bad. I think one player got knocked unconscious briefly due to a crit, but it was no big deal. That was pretty much it. So they are now on the open seas, back on the high seas, sailing to Satis, or not to Satis, sailing to Nharuun on Ocoee Island. And this is the part where they really threw me for a loop, because I had not fleshed out Nharuun like at all. Or I started to, but just before this. But like when they kind of hinted at me that they might be going to Nharuun, they had kind of discussed it amongst themselves at the table. In the back of my head, I was like, okay, I need to start fleshing this out, because this is a very real possibility, and it's gonna all the stuff I prepared for Satis is now gonna need to be reworked depending on whatever level they are when they go to Satis. If they ever do, they might not. And then the black market auction with the Order of the Black Rose, that ends up happening without them. There are other major, literally political world-shaping events that are going to happen at the Glowtide Festival, which will reshape the entire nature of the continent. That might also happen without them there. So there is a very real possibility that this group of adventurers who previously set sail on a ship, having not known each other, shipwrecked on an island, became a cohesive group of adventurers, escaped the island, saved the island, sail to another island, and then show up back on the main continent weeks or even months later, and it's completely been transformed depending on how long they are gone. Because there's going to be a civil war. There's going to be an assassination of a queen. There's going to be a lot of things going down that are going to transition this from a time of peace and prosperity to a time of chaos and a lot of interesting and exciting things. So I'm really excited to see how it shakes out. We're now like really getting to a point where I have no idea what's about to happen, which is really exciting. I mean, I have ideas and things that I want to flesh out, and plot hooks and ideas of things that could happen or may not happen. But the players are, I mean, it's very much like that video game. Think about like Red Dead Redemption 2. You have the first little bit of an arc that's not open world. You're in a snowstorm and you have to play through a little bit of the story before you get unleashed into the open world that Rockstar made. And this campaign functions kind of similarly to that with the Ocoee Island arc. But now we're heading to Ocoee Island, another tropical island, but a den of thievery and piracy and lawlessness and illicit drugs and all kinds of things. It's not quite the level of chaos as something like Tortuga from the Pirates of the Caribbean movie series, but it is not that far off. So I'm really excited to get to the island, which we will get and arrive at the island in the very next session. So I will see you all there.